I'm here with Scott Edmunds in Hong Kong, and we are talking about open data. Scott, what's the status of open data in Hong Kong?
It's a little bit depressing. We're sort of semi-open data in Hong Kong. It's quite telling if you go on the government website, data.gov.hk, it doesn't actually say the word open data on it anywhere. It just says public sector information. Hong Kong, we've had a bit of a kind of interesting legacy. In 1996, the British left a sort of early freedom of information law, early legislation, because they knew they wouldn't have to deal with it. But it's actually, so we have a code on access to information, but it's not really that legally binding. And another problem is we were never given an archiving law. So the government has no legal requirement to actually store anything. So many of the public archives have just been destroyed.
Oh, I see. But you are a few people who are active in this movement, right? Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so Open Data Hong Kong, we're a sort of voluntary group, been going for 3 or 4 years now. Had regular meetups. Involve lots of different sectors. We had the kind of hacker types, government data, policy people, a lot of data journalists here. A lot of the kind of news desks have got like kind of data journalists here. And my background is science data. I'm a kind of research data nerd, and we've had kind of lots of meetups, hackathons. But the problem is there isn't really much data to hack. We've kind of, a lot of the people have lost a lot of enthusiasm having to do things with PDFs and JPEGs and the like. So we've kind of been waiting for data sets to come. That's a bit of a problem.
What's the connection here? Hong Kong, China, open data. What can you say about that?
So Hong Kong, we are one country, two systems. We have our own legal system, economic system, education system, university system, and so our laws are different. We've kind of inherited laws from the British in the 1990s, but they haven't really been updated. So that's kind of a bit of a problem, that we're sort of waiting for we're waiting to leave the 1990s, but that hasn't really happened yet. And in 30 years, we're going to become part of China. But in some ways, China is actually going ahead of us in some areas of open data. If you cross the border to Shenzhen and you open up the bus app, you can see real-time information of all of the buses. It's like the Uber app, all of the buses are driving around in real time. We don't have that in Hong Kong. We spend lowest in kind of R&D in probably the developed world. In some ways, we're being left behind by China. There's some things like, obviously the transparency side, both sides, not having really democratic governments, they're not keen to kind of give us that. But even if you try not to mention the kind of open and transparency word too much, and just focus on the kind of utility for public transport, smart cities, and the like, China's kind of going ahead of Hong Kong, unfortunately.
If we look at your area, the open science, is it as depressive there as well?
A bit. So China is growing leaps and bounds in academic research. They spend a huge proportion of GDP on research, overtaken the US in terms of like numbers of publications and things like this. Hong Kong, we spend less than pretty much anywhere in the developed world on research. Very conservative research funders, no policies on sharing research data and the like. Mainland China is actually overtaking us on that. But in the chief executive's policy address, our kind of mayor or kind of local president, in her address last week, she actually said she wants to double research spending in the next 5 years. So, fingers crossed something will come from that. But, yeah.
Finally, if you look a little bit ahead, and if we try to avoid or if we look a little bit ahead, what do you think? What if you look 5 years from now, or maybe 10 years from now? Is there any small glimpses of hope?
So, populace are quite data literate. You know, we're a high tech society. You know, we have a new government. They actually in their manifesto talked about freedom of information laws, archive laws. You know, fingers crossed. Things might come of that. If we look across the straits to Taiwan, it's essentially a very, you know, it's the same people, and somehow they've managed to, you know, a couple of political cycles turn to the #1 open data country in the world. So who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just hope that it will be better in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
and in some sense actually get inspired by China in this area.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks for talking to me.